Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. Today we test 13 different brands of spanners from Europe versus combo wrenches from the US from brands that we haven't tested yet on the channel. Looking at the amount of grippy they can do before slipping, how much that performance looks like versus their jaw thickness, and then hardness. And finally, comparing those results against what we've measured from the likes of Snap-on, Harbor Freight Icon, Milwaukee, and more. And trigger warning, I ain't about to be pronouncing half these names correctly, so apologies ahead of time. In order of price, we found them for, but likely change based on the countries you're buying them in. We have the Bahco CM Set 10 combination wrench set or spanner set, whichever your preference may be. This wrench comes in a 10-piece set for $75, so $7.50 a piece. Bahco is made in Sweden, and many say a cheaper way to buy Snap-on as they're part of the Snap-on umbrella, but this one's opening measures 0.18 millimeters over nominal, so not off to a Snap-on-like start there. We currently test each wrench more than once in each wrench direction and show you its median result. And we use all new hardware for each, nuts, washers, bolts, everything. This one's jaws measure 6.7 millimeters thick, which is about normal, and it slips and mars the fastener at about 1109 psi of bolt tension, which if you want to play along at home, you can convert to torque using the formula below. Next up in price is the Heyco, the first in a line of German brands we have coming up. This one measures only 0.09 millimeters over what's stamped on the tool, which is a channel record, beating the 0.11 millimeters over Snap-on. She's toit. But also slender, only 6.25 millimeters thick at the jaws, which we factor in scoring, but may make for a hard go at pumping up things in the PSI here. But it still passes the Bahco with 1220 nonetheless. Should do very nice in performance per jaw thickness, likely helped by that tight tolerance. Alright, and here we have the Hazet jumping up from $9 to $10 a wrench now. The German brand Hazet looks very similar to the Heyco, but has this cool offset sort of boxed in design. The Hazet measures 0.14 millimeters over, which is still quite good. We often see 18s and 20s, for example. Its jaw thickness is at 6.5 millimeters, which is on the thin side, but has its benefits, but it doesn't stop it from piling on the PSI nicely, and the Hazet reaches up to 1368 before slipping. Very nice. And here we have the brand I'm going to call Gedore, another German example, $10.83 a wrench as found. This one's a true spanner, no box end, and rocks that seemingly popular over there sandblasted satin chrome finish. Also 0.14 millimeter over like the Hazet, but 6.3 millimeters thick, which again is on the quite narrow end of things. This one felt very grippy or sticky depending on how you see it. It wanted to slip but wouldn't let go and turned things up to 1309 before it did so, earning itself second place at the moment. And finally on the channel we have a Wera or Wera. This is the Joker, a highly requested wrench for us to try, and it's certainly different. Like a cut open 12-point box end made into an open end. They make two versions of this, one with an even additional feature, limit stopper at the top to stay atop a nut as you follow it down. Then this version without that machine piece into it, which I felt might be thicker and have more purchase on a fastener. As they point out, a 12-point inspired design only requires 30 degrees of repositioning or just 15 when you flip it over back and forth. Pretty cool, but does it help it grip? We'll have to see. To the best of my ability measuring across the flats on a 12-point design, this one is 0.13 millimeters over, which is very good. And we needed to do 6 tests on this one, both wrench directions and the nut gripped by the jaw flats versus it starting sort of clocked into its corners. The first median result you're seeing here is in the corners, and it reached up to 1020. Not top level stuff here, but that's probably also the least ideal of the holding positions on this. We of course also tested 30 degrees over, only using the next set of hex points, and we're able to muster up to 1022. Yep, about the same. And this wrench was very consistent, as much as like 1% off of what we're seeing here. Even as a function of its jaw thickness, it's just not great comparing to a normal wrench, as you see up here from the scores of Bahco and Gedore. I personally use this wrench for cramped quarters where a ratcheting design wouldn't work, so maybe not peak torque situations anyways. Do with that information what you will. All right, a couple more European examples here before we meet some USA stuff. USA wrenches just seem to cost more is why. And next up we have the Stahwille. I think it's like Stahwille. A unique looking wrench in comparison to those thus far. 7mm jaw thickness and 0.13 millimeters over. Nothing wrong with that. But this one will sort of jump scare you. You're just going about your day, then all of a sudden the wrench lurches forward. Have no idea why. Tested this 3 times, less than 0.5% difference between runs. It did not like being pushed. Maybe we got a lemon. So Beta is up next, an Italian brand. We have 2 examples from Beta today because the first one we ordered, we accidentally got a tappet wrench, which is not a traditional wrench. A tappet wrench usually being a shorter, thinner sort of snugging up wrench, and that's exactly what this is. But looks cool, so we wanted to include it just because. The standard wrench looks very American style, its finish and length. It measures 0.13 millimeters over and 0.11 millimeters over for the tappet wrench. That's very nice. The tappet is up first, and it's a bit awkward to crank on this, understandably, but this thing feels solid. I don't always know what it is, but some wrenches just feel confident while being abused like this, and others feel loosey-goosey. This one, despite its narrow jaws, is able to climb up in the points quite well, surprisingly, up to 1233 before slipping. The standard wrench is wider at the jaws, but strangely didn't help it much and delivers 1208, so less on every test, by the way, than their tappet wrench. If you need a little palm wrench like this, look no further. This little guy is a beast, and you'll never be able to generate enough torque on its length to make it slip. 212 is an overall record on the channel for performance per millimeter of jaw thickness. Pretty sweet. All right, and finally we have some US entries because it took this long to get here in pricing. At $160 a set, $16 a wrench, this is the Williams Super Combo. And this is one of the nicer wrenches I've ever held, not because it's US made, it's nicer than some US wrenches we've had on the channel, and well, including Snap-on, who Williams is often making things for, like sockets. Its thick, bolstered, smooth radius edges give it a nice weight and comfort when cranking on it, and it tapers at the head down here for more access. I've never seen a Super Combo wrench in person before, so this is just my impression. By the numbers, the opening measures 0.09 millimeters over, which is a good sign. And that open end is our first specialty non-slip design of the day. Europe doesn't mess around with reinventing the wheel, it seems. It has a couple simple cuts and a radius groove design that, according to them, is designed grooves that direct wrench force away from the fastener corners. With 7.6 millimeters in thickness, that should help, which is somewhat typical of US wrenches, I find. And the Super Combo is one of those wrenches that feel planted until you're at the end and you know it's about to go sideways, which is a good thing. Instead of it being sudden, you can see it coming. Quite good. Was also expecting more from the several tests we did with this, given what we've seen from non-slip designs in the past. Okay, next is King Dick. You can't head over to Europe without stopping over in the UK and ordering some King Dick. This one admittedly was much more expensive, bought in the US, so it's worth pointing out that as a set was $16.60 a wrench here, but over there is much less. This is another brand suggested often by our viewers, much to the dismay of the comment section language filter. I've actually seen this brand a handful of times here in the States in shops, so it must have a reputation. It measures 0.15 millimeters over, good, and just 6.25 thick, so it's more of a length over girth sort of deal. And when you put it to the task, well, you just gotta watch the King Dick.
That other piece shot off into outer space. I broke my dick.
Yep. Unfortunately, we couldn't do our minimum of 3 tests on this one. This was its first use. In a surprising scenario for us, even the worst wrenches we've tested have never done this. We'll have to see what hardness testing reveals on this one coming up. And next here we have Proto, $190 a set, $19 a wrench. This is a USA made wrench and features their anti-slip design. And spoiler alert, we've tested a different size of this wrench on rounded stuff on the channel before and found it to be very good. But how good compared to the 32 plus brands we've tested so far? Who knows? This design is very similar to the Williams and isn't going to be eating up a bolt head like some of the other shark bite looking jaws that have hit the dyno in the past. It measures 0.12 millimeters over and has an 8 millimeter wide jaw, which is certainly on the wide end for this size. But it uses that size and that anti-slip jaw design to, well, yeah, you guessed it, not slip, and climb up and up and up in bolt tension, just dunking on everything we've tested today so far. This is a median run, but was able to max out the fastener here and cause it to start collapsing in on itself when run this way or with the wrench flipped around. Though it did reach higher numbers in this orientation for whatever reason. So this moves it into the elite class of wrenches to max out the setup, which includes only one other brand you'll be seeing it ranked against shortly. Going up in price yet again, we now have Cornwell that our viewer Anthony sent us 2 separate examples of. This ratcheting one because it's an anti-slip design, and this other USA made one here. Here's the ratcheting anti-slip first, which measured 0.13 millimeters over and is 7.6 millimeters thick. This design is very reminiscent of the Snap-on Flank Drive Plus, with cuts and lines on one side and a raised part on the opposing end, and has a similar effect as well, raising up into the ranks, very close to the 1492 the Snap-on made in our first episode with 1468 here. Very good. The USA-made wrench from Cornwell uses the hex throat design we're not a big fan of and contend perhaps does nothing, and while dimensionally it's good with 0.13 millimeters over and 7.7 millimeters thick, doesn't excel here in either direction we used it in, making 1015 to 1045 in testing both directions. Not great. Anthony wanted us to include both to perhaps encourage Cornwell to maybe improve this one, so here you are. Okay, and last, I promise, no more after this, we have the Mac Tools Knuckle Saver, a USA-made wrench with a long history of not sucking, and they're proud of it too, it seems, as they currently sell for $54 a wrench, $545 a set. That's more than the Snap-on and Snap-on FD Plus. Tight tolerance, 0.12 millimeters over, 7.4 millimeter jaw thickness, and this one does well, making it up to 1,374 in this direction, 1,420 in any direction, but in its 5 tests, the one you're seeing here is a median. Very nice. It appears Mac Tools has an RBRT wrench possibly coming out soon, named after their rounded bolt extractor line, so curious to see how that one does versus this one, if we can get our hands on it. Okay, on to scoring and hardness. We're not going to have you sit through all the testing of these wrenches and hardness after the chrome was removed, so here's all of those. Typical hardness for wrenches we've tested on the channel is about 47 Rockwell. So the standouts here being Gedore, which is too soft, even compared to the ANSI standard we use here in the States, so might not pass inspection here. And this one, yes, the King Dick is hard. And not in a good way. You can get away with this sort of hardness measurement if your wrench is thick, but thin and hard is doing no one any good, as it called it quits before things really even got started. Here's scoring for wrench tolerance, and we have to add some rare 11 out of 10 scores here for doing better than any other previous wrench that had already earned a 10. In general, these European brands are tighter clearance than the US or Asian sources. US wrenches have been good too, and they beat Taiwan and other Asian sources on average. Without specialty jaws, it seems though, Europe not as high in the twisty torque. This is what that scoring looks like. The Stahwille gets a 1 for obvious reasons. The Hazet did quite well, and the more expensive wrenches down here, they did well too, as you'd hope. As a function of their performance and jaw thickness, Europe again did very well, being slimmer than most, but in some cases still doing well despite that. Gedore, Hazet, Beta. Proto gets an 11 here for scoring a 10 by the points, but maxing out the rig, so getting a bonus since it didn't really meet its maximum. And this is how the points average out. 6 points for the Bahco, 8.33 for Heyco, 8.66 for Hazet, 8.66 for Gedore, 6.33 for the Wera Joker that didn't really like our nonsense, then 4.33, 6.66, 8.33, 8.66, 5.66 for the Broken Dick, 10.33, 9, and 8.66, putting the Proto anti-slip at the top of everything we've ever tested, beating the Right Grip 2.0 purely on bolt clearance, admittedly. Though it is a little bit more costly, I feel they can be found a lot easier too. Check the links below. Very nice. The Cornwell placed well here, and this is how these placed compared to the Snap-on and Icon over here. Williams as well, those are super nice in person I feel, and some well-placing European examples too, beating the Milwaukee and Matco specialty jaws along the way. Considering this And this, I'm going to have to hand it to the US brands on this one, though you'll have to pay for that privilege as these things aren't cheap, even compared to buying European spanners in the United States. Appreciate you joining us for this one when we make episodes at least every Friday. Click subscribe to catch those, and thanks for watching.